So besides music and the books I'm writing on this channel, I'm sometimes discussing philosophical ideas in a simple, sometimes even unfinished or provocable way. It's called it debatable, and today there's supposed to be an example for this. So we're starting with an example for a root. This is the argument for to be called the tree argument, and it is the following, or the plant argument, you can call it as well. Roots have further roots. They formulated to be a plant. Is then a stem a root? Well, so would be roots forming from a root. Then plants are also roots. Hence, a new branch of a root classifies as a stem which is a branch. Meaning the topic is there are things that are so debatable and so such of sort of occurrences that differ from that which are these. Meaning the argument seems to be very much clear, but even by portraying a simple differences in it, they formulate the same argument, but they are then of itself an occurrence of a singular argument that differ from this but measure up to the same idea, meaning one difference in the debate or in the argument doesn't follow up to a new conclusion but to a whole different debate. Further with the example, well, then plants are also roots, but just for as long as connected to the plant. Well, not a connected root, only to a root that doesn't add up to the stem, nurtures the plant as well. So roots are not to be distinguished by the plants, meaning this gives rise to the fundament. When you are debating your own thoughts and reach out to the point where the question alone leaves a paradoxical answer at view to be almost infinitizable. For example, in this, well, if a connected root only to a root that doesn't add up to the stem nurtures the plant as well, then it's still roots and plants. So roots are not to be distinguished by plants, meaning a mere answer to the debate leaves at no question. We're now at the conclusion. Nonetheless, the paradoxical answer, hence now we have a new classification that seems to be even scientifically relevant, leaves only these three options. Example. Well, roots are to be distinguished by plants, but roots are not to be distinguished by plants if they nurture the plant as well. So roots and plants are not to be distinguished from each other. Could be. Well, could be, but as well as the plants are the only viable aspect to distinguish roots. So roots can't be distinguished, or are new sorts of parameters by definition roots to these? That's debatable. Only if the roots are the component of the plant and not plants, hence they interconnect. Only also in theory. That's debatable. That's debatable. Not so, roots are definitory to themselves and to be a plant. Meaning, option 1. We are at, well, could be that plants are the only viable aspect to distinguish roots, meaning that which stems from a plant, for example, by as long as they formulate to be a plant, meaning by formulating a stem. Well, the debate circulates back to its root of meaningless but furthers the argument. Option 2. We are at only if roots are the component of a plant and not plants, hence they interconnect in theory, because if not so distinguished from each other, then plants are also roots. Meaning option 2. The argument ends the debate, but the conclusion arrives at a discussion towards the meaning of means used of only one argument. Meaning we now have the argument that roots, not as, but the first argument was that plants are arriving from roots that stem or to a plant or make the stem of a plant, meaning the argument circles back to the meaninglessness of one argument or line of argument. Option 2, roots are of such idea that they interconnect, hence they are not to be distinguished. For it, they arrive at this, that is a debatable subject, and thus roots are also a plant. The argument ends that at this debate, but the conclusion, meaning roots are arriving to be plants, are discussion towards the meaning of that which was used as means for the argument. Or option 3, Well, that's debatable only if roots are the component of a plant and not plants, hence they interconnect in theory. That is debatable. That's debatable. Not so, roots are definitory to themselves to be a plant, meaning the discussion only by a Callitdebatable possible to solve. So what's a Callitdebatable? That's then a topic to be debated, but settles the argument. That's debatable. You must know that the root doesn't cause itself to be that, but the development of the plant, even if caused by roots. So we are now at option 3. We are at the paradoxical nature of this argument and arriving further at the following line of words. That's already cleared. They are definitory to themselves. Well, then plants can cause new plants, but roots can too. Now we are at the paradox. At first, we had the argument option 1. The debate circulates back to its root of meaningless but furthers the argument. So either plants are not to be distinguished from roots, or a plant is a plant because it stems from a root. Option 2. The argument ends the debate, but the conclusion arrives at discussion towards the meaning of means used of only one argument. Well, if roots are to be distinguished, then plants are not to be distinguished from roots, and thus this is debatable. So explain what a plant is. Or, if roots and plants are not to be distinguished, then what stems to a plant from a root is what makes the plant, and thus plants have roots. Now we use this as a line of argument. And now we are at option 3, a paradoxical answer to the debate. Meaning, well, then plants can cause new plants, but roots can too. Yes, but by definition of means, you have classified that plants and roots are not to be distinguished unless the roots make the plant. Or option 1, plants and roots are not to be distinguished, thus plants and roots are that one of the same. Meaning, such sort of occurrence when the argument drawn from a debate at the alternative question is formulating no conclusion, but stand alone of debating it to be a new topic that rewrites the aspects of such from accept the leading premises without declaring it a new debate that would be without the resolvement of the former. So what is a Callitdebatable? Well, it leaves no else of explanation than the question as an answer to the paradox, but similar that led to the paradox that is the new debate. Example. The root to be a root thus is the argument. That's debatable. So there are roots that make a new plant that wasn't a plant nor a root from a stem. That's impossible. That's debatable. Well, the new root was caused by the space freed by the plant. You said it was a root from the plant. It is only from the interconnected part. That's not debatable. Well, that's debatable. Roots that are not interconnected to root or plant but are from it must be classified as different and thus its own root or its own plant. That's debatable. Call it debatable. Possible answer: the root must then build a new part from a plant that is not just a stem, meaning already something that is of leaves or something else. And this is basically what this other idea of the channel is about. So that are Callitdebatables. Something that leaves no else explanation of the question as an answer to the paradox, but similar that led to the paradox that is the new debate.